Where do tubes sound best? This good question comes from Aaron in Birmingham, United Kingdom. Hi, Paul. I've been watching many of your insightful videos filled with audio knowledge and happened to come across the Ask Paul and TED Talks. That's actually a good one. TED is so fun. You mentioned that tubes are good in certain positions, and you would argue this all day long. My question is, can you enhance on this? Do you mean having tubes in your power stage is beneficial rather than the preamp stage, or vice versa? Or should they be somewhere else in the audio signal? Thanks for looking, Paul. Great to hear from you. Well, thank you, Aaron. And yeah, I have pretty strong feelings on where tubes are best and where they're not best. And you kind of nailed it. Tubes are voltage amplification devices. They do current, yes, but they're happiest when they're working with voltage, in my opinion. And I've heard great tube amplifiers. Arnie used to have a pair of these giant Sonic Frontier. I swear to God, the thing was as big as this, and just bristling with KT88s or whatever they had. These big fire bottles on here, lighting up the place, wow. There were some fabulous sounding vacuum tube amplifiers. Still are today. I still find the combination of input vacuum tubes, output solid state to be my preference. I just love the control that a solid state amplifier has, a properly designed one. You can make some real crap, but if you properly design the output stage of a power amplifier, give it the oomph that it needs, get all the feedback and the current and the biasing and everything right so it sounds sweet, and then throw a tube on the front for the voltage gain stage, that's the best place to put a tube, or when you're creating a vacuum tube or a preamplifier use of vacuum tube. So, one of the things that I probably don't cover enough is we talk about putting, my favorite way of putting a vacuum tube in the front end of a power amplifier. And one might say, well, why do you want to do that? Well, one of the things to understand is what's the insides of a power amplifier? We've talked before about the insides of a CD player, right? You have two components. You have a transport, the spinny thing with the laser that reads the little silver discs. And then over here, you have the digital to analog converter, the DAC, which takes those bits and converts it to something you can hear. Two pieces make up one product. And in a power amplifier, you have a similar situation. You have two circuit topologies that are very different from each other that make up a power amp. And a power amp is basically a voltage gain stage and a current gain stage. So the voltage gain stage takes a little signal, let's say 1 volt out of your preamplifier, and it amplifies it to a very high voltage, maybe 60 volts, 40 volts, depends on the gain of the amplifier and how many watts that you want and all that. So depending on the gain, let's call it a gain of 30. So if I put 1 volt in, this voltage gain stage, which is essentially a preamplifier, will convert that 1 volt into 30 volts. Now we have big voltage. But if I were to take that big voltage, that output, and plug it into a speaker, it would just collapse because it doesn't have something that we need, current. It just is voltage, and it doesn't have the ability to drive a low impedance load or to move motors and coils that you find in a speaker. For that, we need watts, power, horsepower. And that's where you attach the second part of a power amplifier, which is the output current stage. It doesn't have any gain, voltage gain. So 30 volts in, you get 30 volts out. But what it does have is a whole bunch of buffering circuits that take that output and at the input of this current stage, we have high impedance. so that it's easy to drive it, and over the course of the entire circuit, the impedance gets lower and lower and lower and lower and lower, till at the output we have like 0.01 ohms, and we can deliver that voltage with a ton of horsepower behind it. So those are the two major gains, circuit topologies within a power amplifier. And I prefer vacuum tubes, if we can, on the input to do that voltage gain, and I prefer MOSFETs and solid state devices on the output to do that current gain. Hope that answers your question. Thanks. And as always, give us a call, 800 PS Audio. We have hi-fi specialists that will answer any of these questions, and they can pontificate just like me. They'll explain how amplifiers work, they'll answer your questions about what a DAC is, all of that good stuff. Even if you're in the UK, you just have to get the time differences right. And today, phone calls are cheap, right? So don't hesitate. But anyway, thanks for being part of the Hi-Fi family. I'll talk to you tomorrow.